You won't believe what a 22-year-old poor virgin Maid discovered in a dying billionaire's bedroom at 3 in the morning. The machines were the only things keeping him alive, but it was the women in his house who were killing him. He had built a billion-dollar empire from absolutely nothing, commanded boardrooms, made grown men tremble with a single phone call. But tonight, lying in his own bed in his own mansion, he was completely powerless. And he knew it. His hand trembled as he gripped Mara's wrist, tears streaming down his weathered face. This man who'd never shown weakness to anyone was breaking right in front of her. I gave them everything. Cars, jewelry, credit cards with no limits. Private schools, designer clothes, trips to Paris and Dubai. I thought I was building a family. But all I did was raise vultures who are circling, just waiting for me to take my last breath so they can feast. He pulled her closer, his voice dropping to something desperate and afraid. The billionaire's eyes, clouded with pain and fear, lock onto hers. His voice comes out in a desperate whisper that chills her to the bone. Maybe. If only I had a son with me in all of this. Maybe he will understand. Maybe he'll be different. Before she can process those words, the bedroom door creaks open. His wife stands there in the doorway, silk robe wrapped tight around her frame, her eyes locked on where Cole's hand gripped Mara's wrist. What exactly is going on in here? Her voice was ice, sharp enough to cut. What exactly has he told you? That question would haunt Mara for months to come because this moment, this exact second, would drag her into a battle she never asked for. A war where the weapons were secrets, manipulation, and a dying man's final desperate wish. The stakes? Everything she loved and everyone she cared about. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is about a young woman who walked into a mansion thinking she'd found salvation, only to discover she'd stepped into a minefield where every step could destroy her. First, why would a billionaire, surrounded by family and lawyers, trust his most precious secret to a maid he barely knew? Mara thought her biggest problem was figuring out how to send enough money home to help her mother pay the electricity bill. She grew up in a small town in rural Georgia, the kind of place where everybody knows your name and your business. Her father disappeared when she was 6, just walked out one day and never came back, leaving her mother to raise her alone while working double shifts at the local diner. Mara was 22, a virgin who'd been raised in church every Sunday, taught that purity and hard work were the pathways to blessing. She dreamed of college, of becoming a teacher maybe, someone who could make a difference in kids' lives the way her mother had tried to make a difference in hers. But dreams cost money, and money was the one thing they never had enough of. So when Mara heard about a job opportunity in Atlanta, working as a housemaid for a wealthy family, she jumped at the chance despite her mother's warnings. Baby, rich folks got rich folks problems, her mother had said before she left. You keep your head down, do your work, and don't get mixed up in their mess. Mara promised she would. She promised she'd just work hard, save money, and come home in a year or two with enough to finally breathe easy. That promise lasted exactly 3 weeks before everything changed. The mansion she arrived at took her breath away. A sprawling estate in Buckhead, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art on the walls that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood back home. She felt like an imposter just walking through the front door. Cole Thornton, the man who owned all of this, was 73 years old and dying. He'd built his fortune in real estate and investments, starting with nothing but ambition and a ruthless work ethic that had earned him respect and fear in equal measure. But now, confined to his bedroom most days, hooked up to machines that helped him breathe, he'd become invisible in his own home. His wife, Diane, was 55, elegant, cold as winter ice. She moved through the mansion like she owned it, which technically she would once Cole finally died. Their 2 daughters, Simone and Renee, were in their early 30s, both beautiful, both entitled, both circling their father's estate like vultures waiting for the feast. Mara noticed it immediately, the way they looked at Cole. Not with love or even concern, but with calculation. How much longer? When would the will be read? What percentage would they get? The other staff members warned her within the first week. Don't get too close to Mr. Thornton, the head housekeeper told her. Family doesn't like it when he pays attention to the help. But Mara couldn't help it. There was something heartbreaking about watching this powerful man reduced to loneliness, spending his days staring out the window while his family argued about his assets in the rooms below. She started spending extra time in his room not because she had to, but because she could see he needed someone to talk to. At first, it was simple things. She'd tell him about her town, about her mother, about the dreams she'd put on hold. He'd listen with an intensity that surprised her, like every word mattered. Slowly he began to open up too. He told her about building his empire, about the sacrifices he'd made, about the son he'd always wanted but never had. His eyes would water when he talked about his greatest regret, that everything he'd built, every sacrifice he'd made, would end up in the hands of people who saw it as nothing more than a payday. That's when Mara started noticing the tension. Diane would walk past Cole's room and shoot Mara looks that could freeze blood. Simone and Renee would whisper when she passed, their conversation stopping abruptly, their eyes following her with suspicion. The other staff members started keeping their distance too, afraid of being associated with her, afraid of whatever storm was building. Mara tried to brush it off. She was just doing her job. She was just being kind to a dying old man who had no one else. But deep down she felt it, that shift in the air, that sense that she'd somehow crossed an invisible line she hadn't even known existed. One night, about 2 months into her employment, Mara was cleaning the hallway outside the study when she heard voices. Diane, Simone, and Renee were inside, and they weren't bothering to keep their voices down. "He's getting attached to that girl," Diane said, her tone sharp with irritation. "I've seen the way he looks at her. We need to be careful." "Careful of what?" Simone laughed. "She's nobody. A maid. What's she going to do?" "Your father isn't thinking clearly anymore," Diane continued. "The medication, the illness, it's affecting his judgment. He might do something stupid." "Like what?" Renee asked. "Like changing his will," Diane said, and the room went silent. Mara's heart pounded so loud she was sure they'd hear it through the door. She quickly moved away, her hands shaking, Cole's earlier words echoing in her mind. "You're the only one I can trust." She hadn't understood what he meant then. She was starting to understand now. The family wasn't just cold. They were dangerous. And somehow, without meaning to, Mara had become a threat to their plans. Everything changed on a Thursday night in late September. Mara was finishing her shift, getting ready to head to the small room she shared with another housekeeper, when Cole's emergency call button went off. She ran to his room, her heart racing, expecting to find him in medical distress. Instead, she found him sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his weathered face, his whole body shaking with sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. "Mr. Thornton?" she asked softly, closing the door behind her. "Should I call the nurse?" He shook his head violently, reaching out his hand. "Please," he whispered. "I need to talk to you. Just you. Lock the door." Mara hesitated. Every instinct told her this was wrong, that she should call for help, that being alone in a locked room with her employer was crossing every boundary. But the desperation in his eyes, the raw vulnerability, it broke something in her. She locked the door but removed the key and sat in the chair beside his bed. For a long moment, he just cried and she let him, her own eyes filling with tears because his pain was so obvious, so overwhelming. Finally he spoke. "They're killing me, Mara. Not with poison or violence, but with their coldness, their greed. I'm dying, and the only thing they care about is what they'll get when I'm gone." His voice cracked. "I built everything for family, for legacy, and I don't have anyone who truly cares." "That's not true," Mara said gently. "I care. The nurses care. You're not alone." Cole gripped her hand with surprising strength. "My health is failing faster than the doctors expected. I have maybe 6 months, probably less. And when I die, everything I built, everything I sacrificed for, it's going to be torn apart by people who see it as nothing but money to spend." He paused, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "I need your help, Mara. I need you to do something for me. Something no one else can do." Mara's stomach tightened. "What do you need?" "I need you to promise me something," he said. "I need you to promise you'll do exactly what I ask, even if you don't understand it, even if it scares you. Because what I'm about to tell you, what I'm about to ask of you, it's going to sound impossible. But you're the only person in this house I trust. The only one." The way he said it made Mara's skin crawl with apprehension. "Mr. Thornton, I don't know if I can promise something without knowing what it is." "Then just listen," he said. "And after I explain everything, you decide." What Cole revealed that night shattered Mara's understanding of everything. His empire wasn't just built on real estate and smart investments. There was something else, something he'd kept hidden for decades. He had a son. Not with Diane, but with a woman he'd loved before his marriage, a woman who died giving birth. That son, now 45 years old, had been raised by relatives who never told him who his real father was. Cole had supported him financially through anonymous trusts, had watched from a distance as the boy grew into a man, but never claimed him out of fear of scandal, out of loyalty to the life he'd already built with Diane. Now dying, Cole was consumed with regret. He wanted to transfer a significant portion of his estate to this son, wanted to finally acknowledge him, wanted to give him what he deserved. But there was a problem. Cole's lawyers were all connected to Diane. His financial advisors reported everything to her. He couldn't make any moves without her finding out and blocking them. He needed someone outside the system, someone invisible, someone no one would suspect. He needed Mara. "I've arranged everything," Cole explained, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "There are documents, legal papers, account numbers, everything needed to transfer assets. But they're hidden. They're in a safe deposit box at a bank downtown, and the key is in that envelope on my nightstand. When I die, you need to retrieve those documents and deliver them to my son. You need to make sure he gets what's rightfully his before Diane and the lawyers lock everything down." Mara felt like she couldn't breathe. "Mr. Thornton, I can't do this. I'm just a maid. I don't know anything about legal stuff. What if I mess it up? What if they find out?" "That's exactly why it has to be you," Cole insisted. "Because you're invisible to them. And because you're good, Mara. You have a good heart. My son deserves someone like you fighting for him." Tears rolled down Mara's cheeks. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I don't have time left," Cole said simply. "My heart is failing. The doctors say it could be any day now. I need to know that when I go, someone will keep this promise. Someone will make sure my son knows I loved him, that I never forgot him, that everything I did was for him." The weight of what he was asking crashed down on Mara like a physical force. This wasn't just some simple favor. This was life-changing, potentially dangerous, and completely terrifying. "I need to think about this," she whispered. "I need to pray about it." Cole nodded, releasing her hand. "I understand. But please don't take too long. Time is something I don't have much of anymore." Mara left his room that night feeling like the world had tilted. She went back to her room, fell to her knees, and prayed harder than she'd ever prayed in her life. "God, I don't know what to do. I don't understand why this is happening. Please show me the right path." She stayed on her knees until her legs went numb, tears soaking her face, fear and confusion warring in her heart. And somewhere in that desperate prayer she felt something. Not a voice, not a clear answer, but a gentle conviction that she couldn't ignore. Sometimes God puts us in impossible situations not because we're capable, but because He is. The next morning Mara went back to Cole's room. Her voice shook as she spoke, but her resolve was steady. "I'll do it. I'll help you. But you need to tell me everything, every detail, because I can't afford to make mistakes." Relief washed over Cole's face like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Thank you," he whispered. "You have no idea what this means to me." Over the next 2 weeks, Cole explained everything to Mara in careful detail. His son's name was Isaiah, a teacher living in Chicago, completely unaware of his true parentage. The safe deposit box contained updated legal documents, DNA evidence proving paternity, account transfers, and a letter Cole had written explaining everything. Mara would receive the key and instructions on exactly when and how to retrieve the documents. It had to be done immediately after his death, before Diane could lock down his estate. But here's what scared Mara most. Cole made her promise she wouldn't tell anyone, not even after he died, until Isaiah had everything secured. If Diane finds out, she'll destroy those documents. She'll tie everything up in legal battles for years. Isaiah will get nothing. You have to be invisible, Mara. Invisible and careful. As Cole explained the plan, Mara noticed something that made her blood run cold. Diane had started watching her. Not obviously, not confrontationally, but Mara would catch her standing in doorways, her eyes following Mara's movements, calculating, suspicious. The daughters had stopped pretending to be civil too. They'd bump into her in hallways, making comments about knowing her place, and not getting ideas above her station. The atmosphere in the mansion became suffocating. Then came the night that would haunt Mara forever. She was bringing Cole his evening medication when she found Diane already in his room. They were arguing, their voices low but intense. "You're changing your will again," Diane accused. "I saw the lawyer's number on your call log." "That's none of your business," Cole shot back, his voice weak but defiant. "Everything you own is my business," Diane hissed. "I've stood by you for 30 years. I've earned every cent of your fortune." "You've tolerated me for 30 years while spending my money," Cole corrected. "That's not the same thing." Diane's eyes blazed with rage. Then she noticed Mara standing in the doorway. The look she gave Mara was pure venom. "What are you doing here?" Mara held up the medication tray. "Just bringing Mr. Thornton his pills." "Leave them and get out," Diane ordered. Mara set down the tray and hurried out, but she heard Diane's next words clearly. That girl knows something. I can see it in her eyes. We need to handle this before you do something irreversible. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling, Cole's envelope hidden under her mattress, terror coursing through her veins. What had she gotten herself into? This wasn't just about delivering documents. This was about standing between a dying man and the family that was circling like predators. She was in danger. Real danger. And the scariest part? She'd promised to see this through. If this story has your heart racing, comment, "I'm still watching right now." Because what happened next will make your jaw drop. The following weeks were psychological torture for Mara. Diane launched a campaign of subtle warfare designed to break her down and push her out. It started small. Mara would finish cleaning a room only to have Diane inspect it minutes later, claiming she'd done a poor job. Her work schedule got changed without notice, forcing her to work double shifts with no explanation. Other staff members, clearly instructed by Diane, stopped talking to her altogether. She became a ghost in the mansion, isolated and vulnerable. Simone and Renee joined their mother's campaign with cruel efficiency. They'd leave expensive items lying around, then accuse Mara of stealing them. They'd spill things on purpose and demand she clean it immediately, standing over her with mocking smiles while she scrubbed. They'd make comments about her appearance, her background, turning her very existence into a joke. Does she really think Daddy cares about her? Simone said one day, loud enough for Mara to hear. He's just lonely. She's convenient. The moment he's gone, she'll be tossed out like yesterday's trash. The words cut deep because part of Mara feared they were true. Was she being used? Was Cole manipulating her? But then she'd visit his room and see the genuine gratitude in his eyes, the way his face would light up when she entered. "They're trying to break you," Cole told her one afternoon, his breathing labored. "I see what they're doing. I'm sorry, Mara. I never wanted you to suffer like this." "It's okay," Mara lied. "I can handle it." But she couldn't, not really. The stress was too much for her. She lost weight because anxiety killed her appetite. She couldn't sleep because nightmares about being caught plagued her rest. She called her mother crying more than once, but she couldn't explain what was happening because she'd promised Cole secrecy. Her mother sensed something was desperately wrong. "Baby, come home. Whatever money you're making isn't worth this. I can hear it in your voice. You're breaking." "I can't leave yet, Mama. I made a promise. I have to keep it." "Some promises aren't worth keeping if they destroy you," her mother warned. But Mara had been raised to honor her word, especially when given to someone in need. She stayed. Cole's health deteriorated rapidly. The 6 months the doctors predicted shrank to 3, then 2. He had good days and bad days, but the bad days were becoming more frequent. During his good moments, he'd go over the plan again with Mara, obsessively checking that she understood every detail. "The moment I'm gone, you need to act fast. The bank is open until 6. You'll need identification. I've left a letter authorizing you to access the box. Everything you need is in the envelope." On his bad days, he'd drift in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling out names Mara didn't recognize, sometimes crying about the son he'd never claimed. Those were the days that broke her heart completely. Here was a man who had everything money could buy, dying alone because he'd sacrificed real relationships for wealth and reputation. It was a sobering lesson that Mara would carry forever. Meanwhile, Diane escalated her tactics. She tried to get Mara fired 3 separate times, bringing fabricated complaints to the house manager. The only reason Mara survived was because Cole intervened each time, using what little energy he had left to protect her. This only made Diane more suspicious and more aggressive. "He's protecting her because she's manipulating him," Diane told anyone who'd listen. "That girl has her hooks in my husband, probably trying to get written into the will." The daughters hired a private investigator to dig into Mara's background, hoping to find dirt they could use against her. When they found nothing because Mara's life had been boringly clean, they grew more frustrated. They couldn't understand why their father trusted this nobody over his own family. The answer was simple but painful, because his family had never given him a reason to trust them. One night, about a month before Cole finally passed, Mara experienced the first real physical threat. She was walking back to her room after a late shift when someone grabbed her from behind in the darkened hallway. A hand clamped over her mouth before she could scream. She recognized Renee's perfume before she heard the voice in her ear. "Listen very carefully, you little parasite. Whatever my father promised you, whatever you think you're going to get, it's not happening. If you know what's good for you, you'll quit tomorrow and disappear back to whatever backwoods town you came from." Mara struggled, terror flooding her system, but Renee's grip was surprisingly strong. Nod if you understand me. Mara nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face. Renee released her with a shove that sent Mara stumbling into the wall. By the time Mara turned around, Renee was already walking away, her silhouette disappearing around the corner like nothing had happened. Mara ran to her room, locked the door, and collapsed on her bed, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to pack her bags and leave this nightmare. But then she thought about Cole lying in that bed, putting all his hope in her, trusting her with his final wish. She thought about Isaiah, a man who didn't even know he had a father who'd loved him from afar all these years. And she thought about the promise she'd made, not just to Cole, but to God in that desperate prayer weeks ago. The next morning, despite her swollen eyes and trembling hands, Mara showed up for work. Cole noticed immediately. "What happened?" he asked, his eyes sharp despite his weakness. Mara hesitated, then told him everything about Renee's threat. Cole's face darkened with anger she'd never seen before. He immediately called for his lawyer, not one of the ones connected to Diane, but a different attorney he'd secretly been working with. Within hours, a security measure was in place. Mara was assigned a panic button, and the security staff was informed that any physical threats against her were grounds for immediate police involvement. This move infuriated Diane. She confronted Cole that very evening, and their argument could be heard throughout the mansion. "You're humiliating me. Protecting some random maid over your own daughter. Your daughter threatened her. She put her hands on someone under my protection." "Your protection? She's an employee? Since when do you care so much about the help?" The question hung in the air, loaded with suspicion and accusation. Cole's voice dropped to something cold and final. "Since I realized my family cares more about my money than my life. At least Mara sees me as a human being." That statement marked the point of no return. Diane stopped pretending civility altogether. She moved into a different wing of the mansion, making it clear she was just waiting for Cole to die. The daughters followed her lead, creating a literal divide in the house, them on one side, Cole and Mara on the other. The staff was forced to choose sides, and most chose Diane because she'd be signing their paychecks once Cole was gone. Only the nurses and a couple of longtime employees remained neutral, doing their jobs without getting involved in the family drama. Mara found herself spending more and more time in Cole's room, not because her duties required it, but because they'd both become isolated. They talked about everything. Cole shared stories about building his business, about the mistakes he'd made. Mara talked about her faith, about how she'd always believed God had a plan even when life seemed impossibly hard. "Do you really believe that?" Cole asked one night. "Even now? Even with everything you're going through because of me?" Mara thought carefully before answering. "I believe God doesn't waste our pain. I don't know why I'm here, why you chose me for this, but I believe there's a reason. Maybe it's to help Isaiah. Maybe it's to teach me something. Maybe it's just so you don't have to die completely alone." Cole's eyes filled with tears. "You have a beautiful soul, Mara. Don't let this world take that from you." As December approached, Cole's condition became critical. He was moved to full hospice care, which meant medical staff around the clock. Diane used this as an opportunity to severely restrict Mara's access to Cole, claiming the patient needed rest and minimal stimulation. Mara was allowed only 30 minutes a day in his room, always with a nurse present. This restriction terrified Mara because she knew time was running out, and there were still details about the plan that felt unclear. During one of her brief visits, Cole managed to slip her a note when the nurse briefly stepped out. It read, "Trust yourself. You know what to do. The envelope has everything. God brought you here for this moment. Don't be afraid." That note became Mara's anchor in the storm. She kept it folded in her pocket, touching it whenever fear threatened to overwhelm her. She prayed constantly, sometimes in her room, sometimes in the mansion's small chapel that no one else ever used, asking God for strength and wisdom she didn't possess. The tension reached its peak 2 weeks before Cole died. Diane discovered that Cole had been secretly meeting with lawyers and making arrangements without her knowledge. She didn't know the specifics, but she knew enough to panic. She called a family meeting that included her daughters, their husbands, and several lawyers. Mara wasn't supposed to know about this meeting, but she overheard enough to understand what was happening. They were preparing for war. Diane's strategy was clear. The moment Cole died, they'd lock down everything, freeze all accounts, challenge any recent legal changes, and investigate everyone who'd had close contact with Cole in his final months. That meant Mara would be under intense scrutiny. The timeline Cole had given her, the window of opportunity to retrieve the documents and get them to Isaiah, it was going to be much tighter than either of them had anticipated. She'd have hours, not days. Maybe less. On a cold Tuesday morning in mid-December, Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep. The nurse found him at dawn, and within an hour, the mansion transformed into chaos. Diane immediately took control, summoning lawyers, accountants, and the entire household staff. Her grief, if it existed at all, was completely overshadowed by her efficiency in securing her interests. Mara, hearing the news from another housekeeper, felt her heart shatter. Yes, she'd known it was coming. Yes, she'd prepared herself mentally. But the reality of Cole's death hit her. He'd been more than just an employer in those final months. He'd been a friend, a confidant, someone who'd trusted her with something precious. And now he was gone, and the weight of his final wish pressed down on her shoulders like never before. She wanted to grieve properly, to sit quietly and remember the conversations they'd shared, the wisdom he'd offered, the vulnerability he'd shown. But she didn't have that luxury. The clock was ticking. Diane called a mandatory house meeting within 2 hours of Cole's death. Every staff member was required to attend. Mara's stomach churned with anxiety as she entered the large living room where Diane stood like a general addressing troops. "I want to thank you all for your service to my husband," Diane began, her voice controlled and cold. "This is a difficult time for our family. In light of recent events, we'll be conducting a thorough review of all household operations, staff access, and any unusual activities that occurred in the past 6 months. If any of you have information about unauthorized communications, legal consultations, or financial arrangements my husband may have made without my knowledge, now is the time to come forward." Her eyes swept the room and landed directly on Mara. The message was crystal clear. Mara felt everyone's eyes turn toward her. The silence was suffocating. She wanted to run, to disappear, but she forced herself to stand still, to keep her expression neutral even though her heart was hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. After the meeting, Mara was pulled aside by Diane's head attorney. "Ms. Johnson, I need to ask you a few questions. This is just routine, you understand." They took her to Cole's study and interrogated her for over an hour. Had Cole given her anything? Had he asked her to deliver any messages? Had she witnessed him signing any documents? Had he discussed his estate plans with her? Mara answered carefully. No, he hadn't given her anything. No messages. She was just a maid. She cleaned his room and sometimes talked with him to keep him company. That was all. The attorney didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he kept circling back to the same questions, rephrasing them, trying to catch her in a contradiction. By mid-afternoon, Mara was finally released from questioning. She went immediately to her room, her mind racing. She needed to retrieve the envelope and get to the bank before it closed at 6. That gave her less than 3 hours. But Diane had posted security at various points throughout the mansion, to protect Cole's valuables during the confusion. But Mara suspected it was to monitor everyone's movements. She couldn't just walk out with an envelope without someone noticing. Mara locked her door and pulled the envelope from its hiding place under her mattress. Her hands shook as she carefully opened it. Inside was a bank key, a letter from Cole authorizing her to access his safe deposit box, a handwritten note with the bank's address and box number, and something she hadn't expected, a separate sealed envelope with her name on it. She opened it with trembling fingers. "Dearest Mara," Cole had written, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. First, let me thank you for your kindness, your courage, and your pure heart. You've given an old man more peace in his final months than he deserved. What I've asked of you is unfair and dangerous, and you have every right to burn these documents and walk away. But if you choose to keep your promise, know that you're giving my son the greatest gift a father could offer: acknowledgement, provision, and proof that he was loved. The bank has been instructed to allow you access. Everything you need is in box 742. Give it all to Isaiah. His address is included. Tell him I'm sorry for not being brave enough to claim him while I lived. And tell him to use what I've left him to build something meaningful, not just consume it. As for you, Mara, there's a separate provision in those documents. You won't be left empty-handed for your faithfulness. But more importantly, don't let this family's darkness poison your light. You're going to face a battle in the coming days. Stand firm. Trust God. He's the reason I found you. With my deepest gratitude and respect, Cole." Mara's tears fell on the paper, smudging the ink. There wasn't time to process the emotions flooding through her. She had to move. She changed into street clothes, put the documents in her purse, and tried to figure out how to leave the mansion without being stopped. That's when she heard a soft knock on her door. She froze, terror shooting through her. "Mara?" "It's Nurse Patricia." Mara opened the door carefully. Patricia had been one of Cole's primary nurses, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes who'd always treated Mara with respect. "You need to leave now," Patricia whispered urgently. "Diane's about to lock down the house. No one in or out without her permission. If you have somewhere you need to be, go now while there's still confusion." "Why are you helping me?" Mara asked. Patricia smiled sadly. "Because Mr. Thornton asked me to. 3 days before he died, he told me you might need help leaving the house when the time came. He didn't tell me why and I didn't ask. But he was a good man underneath all the complications, and if he trusted you, that's good enough for me." Mara felt a surge of gratitude so strong it almost knocked her over. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Patricia checked the hallway. "Staff exit, south side. Security just changed shifts. You've got maybe a 10-minute window. Go. Now." Mara hugged her quickly, then ran. She made it out of the mansion just as she heard Diane's voice echoing through the halls, calling for a complete house lockdown. The December air hit her face like freedom. She didn't have a car, so she ran to the main street and desperately flagged down a taxi. "Downtown, please. As fast as you can." The bank was a 20-minute drive in traffic. Mara spent every second of that drive praying. "God, please let this work. Please don't let me fail Cole. Please protect me." She arrived at the bank at 5:30, giving her exactly 30 minutes before closing. She rushed inside, her breath coming in gasps, her entire body trembling with adrenaline and fear. The bank manager took one look at her disheveled appearance and initially seemed reluctant, but when Mara presented Cole's authorization letter and her identification, his expression changed to one of recognition. "Mr. Thornton left very specific instructions about your access," he said quietly. "Please follow me." He led her to the vault, and within minutes she was standing in front of box 742. The key turned smoothly, and inside she found a thick manila envelope containing multiple legal documents, USB drives, photographs, and several sealed letters. One envelope was marked for Isaiah Thornton in Cole's handwriting. Another was marked for Mara Johnson. She didn't have time to examine everything. She placed it all carefully in her bag, signed the access log, and thanked the manager. As she turned to leave, the manager said something that made her blood run cold. "Miss Johnson, I should mention that Mrs. Thornton's attorney called about an hour ago, asking questions about this box. I told him I couldn't discuss client matters, but he seemed quite insistent. You might want to be careful." Mara's heart sank. They knew. They didn't have proof yet, but they suspected, and they were moving fast. She left the bank and immediately caught another taxi, but this time she didn't go back to the mansion. She couldn't. Not yet. She asked the driver to take her to a coffee shop where she could sit and think. Once there, with shaking hands, she opened the envelope marked with her name. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000 made out to her, along with another letter from Cole. "Mara, this is not payment for your help. You can't put a price on loyalty and courage. This is a gift to help you build the life you deserve. Use it for school, to help your mother, to start fresh somewhere new. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for accepting it. You've earned it through your character, not through manipulation. You are a rare and precious soul. Never forget that." $50,000. Mara stared at the check, her mind unable to process it. That was more money than her mother had made in 10 years of working. That was college tuition. That was a future she'd stopped daring to dream about. But it also meant she couldn't go back to the mansion, not safely. Diane would never believe Mara hadn't manipulated Cole for financial gain. The check was proof in their eyes, even if it was completely innocent. Mara made the hardest decision of her life right there in that coffee shop. She called her mother. "Mama, I need you to listen carefully and not ask questions yet. I'm leaving Atlanta tonight. I'm safe, I have money, and I'll explain everything when I see you. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Her mother, hearing the urgency in her voice, agreed immediately. "Come home, baby. Whatever's happening, come home." Next, Mara had to figure out how to get the documents to Isaiah. She couldn't mail them, too risky. She couldn't deliver them herself because she had no way to get to Chicago quickly and safely. Then she remembered something Cole had mentioned. He'd been working with a private attorney, someone outside Diane's network. The attorney's card was in the envelope. Mara called the number, praying someone would answer at this hour. A woman's voice picked up on the third ring. "Mitchell and Associates. My name is Mara Johnson. I need to speak to someone about Cole Thornton's estate. It's urgent." There was a pause. "Hold, please." A man came on the line a moment later. "This is James Mitchell. Ms. Johnson, Mr. Thornton told me you might call. Are you safe?" The question surprised her. "Yes, for now." Do you have the documents from the safe deposit box? Yes. Good. Listen carefully. Mr. Thornton hired me specifically to handle the transfer of assets to Isaiah once Cole passed. He knew his family would fight this and he wanted legal protection in place. I need you to bring those documents to my office tonight. I'll have them authenticated and delivered to Isaiah through proper legal channels. You've done your part. Let me handle it from here. Mara felt a wave of relief so powerful she almost started crying right there in the coffee shop. Your office address? He gave it to her. It was downtown, about 15 minutes away. I'll be waiting. And Miss Johnson? Thank you for everything you did for him. An hour later, Mara sat in James Mitchell's office, watching as he carefully examined every document, every letter, every piece of evidence Cole had compiled. This is airtight, Mitchell said with satisfaction. Witness signatures, everything properly notarized. Mrs. Thornton can challenge it, and she will, but Isaiah's paternity and his right to this portion of the estate is legally sound. What happens now? Mara asked. I contact Isaiah immediately. I'll need to break the news that he had a father he never knew, which won't be easy. Then I'll begin the process of executing the transfer of assets. Mr. Thornton was very clever about this. He put these assets in a separate trust years ago, outside the main estate, specifically to protect them from challenges. It'll still be a legal battle, but Isaiah will win. Mitchell looked at Mara with something like admiration. You took an enormous risk doing this. Mr. Thornton chose well. Mara's voice was barely a whisper. I just kept a promise. That's more than most people do, Mitchell replied. Now let's talk about protecting you. Mrs. Thornton is going to be furious when this comes out. Do you have somewhere safe to go? I'm going home to my mother tonight. Good. I'd advise staying there for a while. Keep a low profile. If anyone from the Thornton family contacts you, don't engage. Refer them to my office. I'll handle everything from here. Mara left Mitchell's office as the sun was setting, feeling like she'd just run a marathon. Her body was exhausted, her emotions were completely drained, but there was something else too. A profound sense of peace. She'd done it. Against all odds, despite the fear and the threats and the overwhelming pressure, she kept her promise. She'd fulfilled a dying man's last wish. She caught a Greyhound bus that night, heading back to her small town in rural Georgia. As the bus pulled away from Atlanta, she watched the city lights fade in the distance and whispered a prayer. Thank you, God, for giving me the strength, for protecting me, for using me for something bigger than myself. And please watch over Isaiah. Help him understand that his father loved him. How would you feel if you were put in Mara's position? If you had to choose between your own safety and keeping a promise to someone who trusted you with their dying wish? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this story isn't over yet. 2 weeks after Cole's funeral, Mara was still home helping her mother with the dishes when her phone rang. A known number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Is this Mara Johnson? A man's voice asked. Yes. Who's calling? My name is Isaiah Thornton. Mara's heart stopped. She sat down hard in the kitchen chair, her mother looking at her with concern. Mr. Mitchell said I should call you, Isaiah continued. He told me everything. About my father. About what you did. I needed to hear your voice. I needed to thank you. Mara's eyes filled with tears. How are you? I mean, with everything you found out. Isaiah's voice was thick with emotion. Honestly, I'm a mess. Learning about my biological dad is a lot, and that he watched me from a distance my whole life. It's overwhelming. But also I'm angry. Why didn't he claim me? Why did he wait until he was dying? He was scared, Mara said softly. He made choices he regretted, choices based on fear of scandal and protecting the life he'd already built. But he loved you. Everything he did, every decision he made about the trust and the assets, it was because he loved you. He talked about you all the time. He was so proud of you. Isaiah was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Mitchell showed me the letter he wrote. My father, Cole. It's going to take me a while to process all this. Take all the time you need, Mara said. There's no rush to feel any particular way about it. There's something else, Isaiah said. Something Mr. Mitchell told me. My father left me a substantial inheritance, enough to change my life completely. But he also left instructions that I should do something for you. He wanted me to help you however I could, to make sure you got to pursue your education, to be there for you the way you were there for him. Mara was shaking her head even though Isaiah couldn't see her. No. That's incredibly kind, but I already received more than I deserve. Your father gave me a gift. I don't need anything else. Maybe not, Isaiah agreed. But maybe it's not about need. Maybe it's about a father's last wish that the two people he cared about most in his final days, his son and the woman who showed him genuine kindness, should know each other. Would you be willing to meet me sometime? Not about money or obligations. Just to talk about the man who connected us. Mara thought about it. I'd like that. They talked for another 30 minutes, and by the end of the conversation, something unexpected had happened. Mara realized that Cole's final gift wasn't just the money or the successful completion of her mission. It was this connection, this relationship with Isaiah that had the potential to become something meaningful. Over the following months, Mara and Isaiah stayed in touch. He called regularly and eventually he visited her hometown. They spent hours talking about Cole, about faith, about life's unexpected turns. Isaiah was going through his own healing process, working with a therapist to process the complicated emotions around his father's choices. Mara was using the money Cole gave her to enroll in community college, taking the first steps toward her teaching degree. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, the legal battle Mara had feared was raging. Diane had challenged everything once she discovered Isaiah's existence and the transfer of assets. She hired multiple law firms, launched investigations, and tried every legal maneuver possible to overturn Cole's wishes. But Mitchell had been right. The documentation was airtight. The evidence was irrefutable. The trust had been established years before, completely separate from the main estate. Diane could fight, but she couldn't win. What Diane could do, however, was make things difficult. She tried to sue Mara for elder abuse and manipulation. She claimed Mara had taken advantage of a dying man's diminished mental capacity. The allegations made local news. Reporters showed up at Mara's mother's house. People in her small town who'd known her all her life suddenly looked at her differently. It was the darkest period of Mara's life since leaving the mansion. The accusations cut deep because they twisted something beautiful, her genuine care for Cole, into something ugly and transactional. She cried herself to sleep many nights, wondering if keeping her promise had been worth this public humiliation, but Mitchell fought back hard. He released statements with testimony from the nurses who'd witnessed the family's cruelty toward Cole. He provided evidence of the Thornton daughters' threats against Mara. He showed that Mara had never asked Cole for anything, that the gift he'd given her had been entirely his idea, and that she'd actually tried to refuse it initially. Most importantly, he demonstrated that Mara had never acted for her own benefit but solely to fulfill Cole's wishes regarding Isaiah. The case against Mara collapsed within 3 months. Diane's lawyers withdrew the lawsuit, and the court ruled definitively in favor of Isaiah's inheritance. Cole's wishes would be honored exactly as he'd intended. But the real twist came in April, 6 months after Cole's death. Isaiah invited Mara to Chicago. During that visit, he showed her something that changed her perspective on everything that had happened. "I want to show you what I'm doing with the inheritance," Isaiah said, leading her to a community center in a low-income neighborhood. "This building was abandoned. I bought it last month." "What are you going to do with it?" Mara asked. "Turn it into a tutoring center for underprivileged kids," Isaiah explained. "Free educational support, mentoring programs, college prep courses. Everything I wished I'd had growing up. My father spent his life building wealth, and I'm going to spend mine building futures." Tears streamed down Mara's face as she looked around the space, imagining what it would become. "He would have loved this." "I know," Isaiah said. "And I want you to be part of it. Not as an employee but as a partner. You're studying to be a teacher. These kids need people like you, people who genuinely care. What do you say?" Mara didn't have to think about it. Yes. Absolutely yes. That decision changed the trajectory of Mara's entire life. To know how, comment part 2. Meanwhile, the money Cole had given her, the $50,000 that had seemed like such an enormous sum, Mara used it wisely. She paid off her mother's debts. She covered her college tuition. She started a small emergency fund. But she also tithed 10% to her church. Mara finally understood the full scope of what had happened. Cole's dying wish hadn't been just about Isaiah getting his inheritance. It had been about creating ripples of kindness, provision, and opportunity that would extend far beyond his own life. Mara had been the vessel for those ripples, the person through whom Cole's final act of love could flow into the world. That evening, Mara sat on her mother's porch, watching the sunset paint the Georgia sky in shades of orange and purple. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand. "You did good, baby," her mother said softly. "I'm so proud of you." "I was so scared, Mama," Mara admitted. "There were so many times I wanted to quit, to just walk away and let someone else deal with it. But you didn't, her mother said. Because you were raised to keep your word, to stand firm in your faith, and to do what's right even when it's hard. That's not luck or coincidence. That's character. Mara leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. Do you think God planned all of this? That he put me in that mansion specifically for that moment? Her mother was quiet for a moment. I think God puts us exactly where we need to be when we need to be there. Whether we recognize it or not, whether we understand it or not, he's always working. You were faithful in a small thing and he trusted you with something big. That's how it always works. So let me ask you something. What would you have done in Mara's position? When that dying billionaire looked at you with desperate eyes and asked you to risk everything to fulfill his final wish, would you have had the courage to say yes? When his family threatened you, isolated you, tried to break you down, would you have stood firm? I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between doing what was right and doing what was easy? How did it turn out? Thank you for watching this story all the way through. We've got more incredible stories coming your way. God bless you all.